look at, and that's the idea of a program. What is a computer program? Computer program is essentially, in a very simple way, is a collection of functions. Now, depending on the functions, they might have a connection to each other or they might not. So let's have a look at a simple example. Let's define, let's see if I can get my code back up. Hang on, bear with me a second. Okay, so let's define a very simple function. We'll call it, say, I'm only using a short name, mainly because I want to just make the coding here. So let's just say that here I'm just going to say hello. Then maybe a greeting would be a better name for it. Now this brings me, in this little simple change I've made between the word say and greeting, it gives you an idea that functions, if you name them well, explain what's going on inside. Badly named functions often don't explain themselves. So let's have another one. Let's say it goodbye. It's a pretty. Is this a good name for the function? What's the basis upon which you would write? And if I just put goodbye in there, now have a look at these two functions. That function simply outputs the print lines. That function outputs that. You have two separate functions. This function is a more useful name because it tells you roughly what's going on. This function, a bit debatable whether it does really explain itself. Now we come down to main, and main we're going to see as our starting point, our entry point, our program. Okay, think of it as your main program, and it's got two functions it's going to run. First it's going to run greeting, and then it's going to run goodbye. Nice and simple. Let's execute that and see that in action. Let's just get a couple of words and concepts clear once it runs it. Okay, hello, goodbye. It's run them one after the other. Notice that's the first one that ran, that's the second. Couple of critical elements here to bear in mind are, number one, when we run a function, so if you look at the example here where the main is running greeting, one way of talking about it is running a function. What we actually say is we call a function. We call a function, and that's important to keep the language in mind. And technically what happens when we call a function is that when you start here and you go to this one, the code shifts into this function here. It shifts away from main and goes inside here. Then once this bit is finished, it returns to the main, goes to the next line, then it shifts back into here and executes that. It's very important and very simple, but very important you bear that in mind. The very last point I'd like to make just before I finish this video is that a broad function can be defined as some kind of process, something that it does, usually with an input and usually with an output. But if you look at the greeting and the goodbye here, neither of them have input. If you have input, they would go inside these brackets. Nothing is being inputted, or what we say passed to the function. That's the correct language. Nothing is being passed to the function. So we cross out the input, but actually we are outputting here because this is an output statement. So keep those concepts in mind as we work our way through the code.